So is this the actual location where your encounter happened?
Yes, it was the end of summer, and me and Vanessa wanted to come camping one more time. Around 1:30 in the morning, I hear something touch the front of the vehicle.
I saw a tall, dark, broad figure, and it just walked right up against the truck.
She starts crying. She says, I want to get out of here now. So I jump in the front seat, and we pull out and head towards Highway 4.
They saw this creature run through soybean fields, and I actually stood in for the creature and ran off into the woods. Sasquatch is quite well known around here. It's not really an unusual thing for people to report around here. So yeah, back here in Minerva, and we'll see how it kind of goes.
Camping deep in the remote wilderness can feel like an escape. But what happens when the shadows themselves begin to watch? Tonight, we uncover 6 terrifying encounters with massive, unseen creatures. Stories of campers, hikers, and travelers who came face to face with beings no one believes exist. Every rustle, every shadow, could be closer than you think. In the shadowed corners of America, the Small Town Monsters channel uncovers what most refuse to believe. Deep in northwestern Pennsylvania, near the Ohio border by Lake Erie, one traveler drove through territory notorious for unexplained Bigfoot sightings, where the line between rumor and reality blurs with every mile south toward Ohio and Kentucky. Along the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, deep in the remote Allegheny National Forest, the Bigfoot Mapping Project recounts a chilling tale.
So I'm out here in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. I'm actually on the Ohio border and right next to Lake Erie. And apparently this area has a history of Bigfoot sightings, which kind of came as a shock to me. I'm driving through here from Pennsylvania, heading into points south in Ohio, going to Minerva and other areas, Kentucky further south. And I wanted to get a view of Lake Erie. I just passed Erie, Pennsylvania. It's that little strip of Pennsylvania that's right between New York State and Ohio, just a small section that's along Lake Erie. So I said, hey, let me come and check out the lake. And then jokingly, I decided to open up the Bigfoot Mapping Project thinking, oh, wouldn't it be funny if there were Bigfoot reports here? I doubt it.
In 2020, a hunter heard 10 bone-chilling roars over 5 minutes, only 75 yards away, but never saw the source, leaving behind the echo of something massive moving unseen in the shadows.
I would say within a few miles of where I am, looking at the Bigfoot Mapping Project right now, and I'm going to read a few of these reports. So there's one from 2020 that was self-reported to the Bigfoot Mapping Project that's, within a mile of where I'm standing. Took a long route into a hunting spot. Due to high water running in a creek, got within 50 yards of my stand, heard a really loud bark, scream, roar with infrasound. It made this sound 10 times over a 5-minute period, was not able to see anything. The sound came from just over the edge. It dropped into a creek, approximately 75 yards in front of me. Never heard it move or any other noise. The sound froze me in my tracks, felt it rattle in my chest, startled me so much that I could not get my phone out to try and record. The year was a bummer crop of red and white acorns, other abundant types of mast.
A report filed in 2005, a haunting encounter from the fall of 1977 comes to light. A 10-year-old boy wandered into the dense woods in northwestern Pennsylvania. As dusk fell on a cool, misty evening, he paused at a fork in the trail near a small sandpit and sensed something watching him from the shadows, unseen yet impossibly close.
This one is a Class A, reported in 2005. Supposedly this happened in the fall of 1977. I-20 west from Erie, Pennsylvania to West Springfield, PA. Observe, my experience with Bigfoot occurred when I was about 10 years old during the fall of 1977. I was exploring the wooded area between Route 5 and Route 20 in northwestern PA, west of Creighton Road. One cool, wet evening just before dusk, I walked into the woods via the main trail from our house. At the fork in the trail, running north and east, was a small sand pit which I crouched into because I saw something or someone in the distance. I peered over the rough, looking slightly northeastward. I watched this thing for nearly 5 minutes. It was over 7 feet tall and weighed 500 to 700 pounds from as far as I could tell. It was black from head to toe. Even its face was black. It was tearing off tree limbs and pushing over rotted trees. It amazed me because there were really no rotted trees left to push or rotted tree branches to break. Its strength was incredible. I could hear the sound of trees crackling and smashing to the ground.
For minutes, he stared at a towering figure, over 7 feet tall, solid black, moving with terrifying power. Branches snapped, rotted trees crashed around it, as if the forest obeyed its strength. Heart pounding, instinct screamed to run. Without hesitation, he bolted, through the trail, across the field, finally reaching his parents' house, haunted and too afraid to return for months.
I grew extremely scared by Bigfoot's size and strength and what it could do if it saw me. The hair on my body stood straight up without looking back, and I turned and ran as fast as I could. I ran approximately 50 yards back along the trail and another 100 yards through the field to my parents' house. I never returned to explore the woods for another 6 months. There's a follow-up investigation by the BFRO investigator who took this report. I contacted the witness by phone. Further information can be added. The area is seasonally swampy. There are cornfields, wild apple trees, and a few pear trees nearby, providing a food source. The animal moved in a hunched manner from tree to tree while pushing them down. The witness also stated that while the creature was large, it had a lanky, muscular build with broad shoulders.
The creature tore across the soybean fields before vanishing into the tangled, endless forest. One witness even stepped into its path, retracing the moment it disappeared into the shadows. The woods teemed with life. Coyotes prowled, deer scattered, but none of it compared to the raw, unnerving presence that had just passed through.
One of the witnesses that we actually did a recreation practically, a few miles from here, they saw this creature run through soybean fields, and I actually stood in for the creature and ran off into the woods. And it's all interconnected forest, and I've seen coyotes out here. I've been surrounded in a tree stand by coyotes out here. There's so many deer, there's so much wildlife. It's absolutely insane how much wildlife there is out here. There's caves. We visited a cave a few years ago here with Seth that you can actually kind of crawl into and go to. So,
crossing an overgrown path, one observer glimpsed the creature. In less than a second, it vanished toward the tree line, a blur moving through towering weeds and thorny underbrush. Though the path was nearly hidden and choked by growth, the creature navigated it effortlessly, leaving only a sense of speed, power, and something utterly untamed.
I think maybe here is where I would have put eyes on it, because we're crossing there, and then I'm here, and it looked to me like it was running into the woods, but it was also like just
instant,
like immediate.
Like, how many seconds would you estimate
Less
you
than
saw
a
it?
second.
So it was like
it was like
split second.
Yeah, you look up here, you're seeing it, and when you are seeing it, it's already going
right
into the tree line.
So it's just kind of like a blur.
Yeah,
extremely tall.
That's the big thing.
So it's not like we didn't know this path was here at all.
So this was like,
It was thorns.
so this has been all mowed since, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was also, the other thing is they've expanded the width, right?
Yeah, this is twice the size it was when you were here.
As they drove, dark shapes seemed to float across fields and along tree edges. Deep, almost black-brown, blending with the shadows, their movements carried an unsettling, alive yet entirely alien grace, leaving a lingering impression even after disappearing.
I don't know if I can zoom in on them, but there's a lot of them just kind of floating around in the wind here.
Yeah, and what I said is the color's like a very dark brown, borderline, like to my eyes, almost black.
The terrain had changed since their last visit, but the team explored again, hoping for another encounter. Strange occurrences seemed to follow a seasonal rhythm, with sightings peaking at certain times of year. After decades of chilling encounters, from unearthly roars in the Allegheny woods to fleeting glimpses of a towering, shadowy figure, one question remains: what truly prowls these remote forests, and how many more wait unseen for the next traveler? In the foggy depths of Washington's Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, where creeks roar and ancient trees whisper warnings, a chill hangs heavy. Yakima natives call it Skookum Valley, as shown on Salish Sasquatch, and warn people to stay out. Here, campgrounds buzz with Sasquatch hunters, but silence falls when something stirs. Last Christmas Eve, 2 hikers vanished into the wilds, their bodies found miles from their truck, sparking whispers of more than bad luck.
Up here were the 2 hikers on December 24th, Christmas Eve last year, this is where they passed away at. This is right where they were at, and this is right where they brought him out at. So none of us locals can figure out. As soon as we heard this story, even my son-in-law, people I know, we were like, this is absolute crazy.
Audio howls, branch snaps, and a debunked butt crack photo fuel the hunt. But the real horror, unseen eyes in the dark. A burning curiosity drives the search, sparked by rooftop tent scares and fleeting glimpses. Weekends blur into quests. What hurts them? How do they heal? Audio recorders hidden on trails of least resistance capture the unknown.
First night, I'm going to test a theory of putting my audio recorder on this trail right here. This trail is kind of outside of camp, goes for miles. And why wouldn't a Sasquatch use this trail? It's a path of least resistance. So I'm going to put my audio on this trail, just leave it out the first night.
One night, across a creek 200 yards out, a device snags howls that echo human yet bigger, cutting off as phones flip to record. It sounded like it sat right across the river, yelling our way, one hunter recalls. Elk? Wolves? Or something watchful?
We woke up at like 4:30 this morning, and actually I originally thought it was someone at one of the other camps screaming. And then I started thinking maybe it was a wolf or something, but it sounded kind of human-like but bigger. And then when my wife went out to go to the bathroom, I came out, you could tell it was basically it sounded like it was sitting right across the river, like yelling this way. And then as soon as I got my phone out to record, it stopped. Went for an hour straight though.
Dawn breaks with unease. Logs climb to remote stumps. Trail cams primed where a prior setup caught a prowler circling, then bolting with the device. Creep factor spikes near the hiker's fate. December 24th, 2024. Two men, 59 and 37, parked here for a day visit. Dressed wrong for winter, they crossed a flood stage creek, freezing, thigh-high, then plunged through a blowdown no sane soul would. Separated on a ridge 700 feet apart, bodies taken out by ropes and chainsaws through brush.
We had just a little skiff of snow on the ground, and these guys were not dressed for winter conditions.
They were dressed for a day visit, which was their plan.
Yeah, just a day visit. So they had parked up here in this area, and they went down this road right here. And if you guys want to look down there.
You want to go that way?
They were found about 2 miles from this location.
Coast Guard from 120 miles away airlifted them via FLYR, silencing locals. No names released, no why they came answers. FedEx workers from Portland, Bigfoot seekers. The valley's secrecy screams cover up.
Because there's not too many people other than locals that know about this and what's around here and what's going on in this valley. I heard that they worked for FedEx out of Portland, but one guy was 59, one guy was 39 or 37, something like that. The whole thing is just kind of bizarre about really what happened in here.
Whispers turned to speculation. Wrong calls lured them. Natives shun this spot for a reason. No birds, no crickets, just cracks, 3 in a row. Audio yields a rain-soaked howl, analyzed by a military cryptolinguist as high-probability Sasquatch, resonant, too loud for owls, thriving when humans hide indoors. Metallic clangs echo from afar, defying distant camps.
They weren't dressed for it.
I haven't heard any animals at all here.
No, there's no sound at all in here because this valley.
Creep factor here for sure.
I was told
There's a certain creep factor here for sure.
Something's not off.
Yeah.
Because I haven't heard a bird, haven't heard any crickets, I haven't heard.
But we did hear cracks when we came in, didn't we?
Yeah,
we heard three different cracks.
That doesn't surprise me. Off to your left.
No squirrels.
The hunt presses on. A butt crack photo, dark shape downhill amid branch breaks, draws a return. Zoomed by an accidental snap from a video switch, screamed Sasquatch. But boots hit ground, a stump plain as day. Always check. They laugh, though the whisper in the woods mid-hike chills spines. Nearby, an X of high broken trees balances unnaturally, hinting deliberate design. Creeks yield no prints. A walk through water?
That one's balancing on this tree and this one's balancing on that tree. Huh. Very interesting. What if they just didn't follow the creeks but actually walked through them? Because nothing is leaving any prints in this.
Uneventful nights end with pack up, but the forest stirs. The forest is still alive at 2 to 3 a.m. with snaps of thick brush, whoops silencing night. Owls flee for hours, returning tired. Too big for owls, the Guardian mutters after 6 months.
Definitely in the night around 2 and 3 in the morning, there's a lot of breakage. Like heavy trees, like thick brush. It doesn't sound like something that's breaking easy, and I see it in the next day. A couple hours later, if we're lucky, I'll hear the owls come back out. Very, very concerning sounds after 6 months here.
Are you sure they're owls?
Hell no, I'm not sure they're owls. Too big to be an owl.
As valleys fall quiet and howls pierce rain, one question haunts the locals. What claimed those hikers, and is it calling you next?
Here it is. But he believed that was a Sasquatch. What I find is interesting is that it's during rain. So was my vocal that I caught in March. It was during rain, like they feel comfortable or something.
From the heart of untamed wilderness to your screen, Animal Planet takes you on a journey where legends roam free, and the unknown waits just beyond the trees. Adventure begins where the map ends. In the remote Blue Mountains, generations of farmers, hunters, and others have come forward with chilling encounters. Years ago, witnesses began casting mysterious tracks here, including the legendary footprint line that convinced Dr. Jeff Meldrum to take the mystery seriously. Since then, the Blue Mountains have become one of the most important front lines in the search for Bigfoot.
I'm super excited to go up to the Blue Mountains. Farmers, hunters, ranchers have all had encounters and sightings. And what sets this area apart from the other places is that these people started casting tracks like 50 years ago. And it's where Dr. Jeff Meldrum cast that iconic line of tracks, which flipped him to being in our camp.
It is a rare privilege to walk the same ground where a legend was born. This is the exact location where Dr. Jeff Meldrum first studied the mysterious track casts that changed the course of his career. A renowned professor of primate anatomy and foot morphology, he has spent more than 2 decades analyzing Bigfoot footprints. Today, he returns to the place that first pulled him into the mystery that still grips the world.
Professor Meldrum specializes in the anatomy and foot morphology of primates. He's also been collecting and analyzing Bigfoot tracks for the last 20 years. He's the unquestioned expert on Bigfoot tracks, and we're excited to meet with him here at the place that brought him into the Bigfoot world.
It was a powerful moment to return to the very ground where history was made. The site where the tracks were first pulled in 1996, long studied and quietly revered. For Dr. Meldrum, stepping back into this location was deeply nostalgic. His journey began when he and his brother visited researcher Paul Freeman. After reviewing several casts, he had just discovered fresh tracks that very morning. A long, unbroken line of 35 to 45 clear, freshly made footprints stretching through the terrain.
Good to see y'all. This is the location where you pulled those prints back in '96 then?
That's right.
I've wanted to see this location for as long as I've been reading about it.
I know, it's kind of nostalgic for me to be back here.
And how did you become involved with these tracks?
My brother and I, we dropped in on Paul Freeman, and after examining a number of his casts, he remarked, well, you know a lot about footprints. Would you like to see some fresh tracks? And my mouth kind of dropped. I thought, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I just found some this morning. I was flabbergasted. Here was this long line, not a few tracks, but 35, 45 footprints in succession. Very clear.
What held his attention were the subtle irregularities, partial impressions, slight skids, and the faint sweep of toes across the ground. Each mark revealed the mechanics of a powerful body in motion. Keeping pace with its normal stride was nearly impossible, and when it accelerated, the distance between steps far exceeded ordinary human capability.
The imperfections that were so interesting to me. It was the half tracks, it was the slips, it was the toe drags, it was all these other features of the dynamics of the footprints that made them really so astounding. I could just barely match its walking length.
What was the step length when it ran?
About 42 to 52 inches.
The footprints revealed a natural fluidity no fabricated device could mimic. Every impression captured weight and motion, heels scraping, toes brushing, the earth yielding organically beneath each step. With no sign of human interference, the evidence pointed unmistakably to a real, living creature moving through the terrain.
Bear the mark of a rigid prosthetic that was forcefully stamped into the soil, but they look very dynamic in the way in which the foot interacted with the soil, had slide-ins of the heel and drag-outs of the toes. For this to have been faked could not have been accomplished with a single set of artificial feet. It would have required several different sets that were interchanged at just the right places, and that just gets way beyond the realm of credulity.
But then you would have seen the tracks of the people helping to interchange them along
Exactly.
the side. Much more likely it's just a natural, organic animal.
A small but consistent number of witnesses, around 10 to 15%, report an unusual, pungent odor during encounters, often compared to something rotting or sour. When investigators detected the same scent lingering in the forest, they moved cautiously, each step heightening awareness. The trail suggested something unseen nearby, a presence marked as much by the atmosphere it disturbed as by any tracks it left behind.
I'll let you lead the way.
All right, very good.
Yucky.
And that. What? There's a shiny green. That's an eye shine.
If these mysterious tracks and strange signs are truly the work of a living creature, what else might be lurking unseen in the depths of the Blue Mountains, and how long will it remain hidden from human eyes? On Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot revealed, the wilderness hides secrets no one dares to explain. Nearly 2 years ago, in June 2023, Jimmy Tongote was off-roading with friends around Mount Baker. After a day exploring dirt roads and hidden trails, they set up camp on a snowy gravel lot, never imagining the forest had a presence ready to make itself known.
Right around 2 years ago, it was June of 2023, I was off-roading with a bunch of friends up around Mount Baker, and we'd planned on camping for the night, so we spent the whole day running dirt roads, exploring, mapped a couple trails, and then when it's too snowy up on the mountain, it's a big parking lot made of gravel that you can park in. So we decided to camp there for the night because it was kind of a nice.
Jimmy had settled in for the night, exhausted. Suddenly, something jolted him awake. Lying in the pitch-black interior of his vehicle, he listened intently. At first, it was faint, a sound like tires turning on gravel, but it wasn't a car. The sound moved, circling his vehicle, deliberate and slow. Heart pounding, Jimmy sat upright, senses on high alert, trying to understand the presence silently moving just beyond his headlights.
I go to sleep, and something woke me up around 12:30. I looked at my watch, and I'm laying there like really intently listening, trying to figure out what is this sound. And the best way that I can describe it to you is if you've ever been parked on gravel in a vehicle and you turn the wheels and that sound that it makes, that is exactly what I heard, was this sound. And I can hear it walking around my vehicle. And as it's going around the vehicle, I'm now sitting up in pitch darkness and just like really intently listening, trying to figure out, what's going on? Is this somebody,
Whatever was outside sounded far too big to ignore. As it moved, his nerves tightened. He was unarmed, surrounded by darkness so complete he could see nothing beyond the glass. That darkness magnified the fear. What terrified him most was the unknown, the realization that something large was deliberately making a full circle around his truck.
But it sounds too big. And as it makes its way around, I get more and more nervous, and I'm getting more and more afraid. I'm not armed or anything. I don't even have a knife up there. And it's so dark you can't see anything, and I think that helps magnify the terror. I can still like feel it in my chest right now. What I was feeling then is the unknown. And, you know, what is this large, what sounds like a large thing doing? So it makes a full circuit around my rig.
By morning, the small organizer inside had been nudged a few feet from its spot, twisted and crumpled as if handled with quiet curiosity. The night's visitor hadn't just passed through, it had explored, tested, and left a subtle mark of intelligence. The scene was unnerving and fascinating, lingering in the mind long after the forest fell silent.
It would only go like a foot, foot and a half, maybe 2 feet, and it would be all crumpled and everything. But I think not only was there a Sasquatch walking around my rig and messing with my tent, but I think it also decided to have a little fun with the human and kind of pull a little prank and take that organizer and lay it out. But man, that completely blew my mind.
Something stood where no one should have been, towering over 8 feet, its deep cinnamon form faced northeast, fixated on an unseen point across the river. Nearby homes, a road, and a thick tree line were in view, but its attention remained elsewhere. Its size and stillness made it impossible to look away, a silent presence radiating both mystery and awe.
See something standing there that shouldn't be there. And it's about an 8.5 foot tall, cinnamon colored Sasquatch that is faced away from me, kind of looking northeast. So you have the bend in the river, there's some like houses over here, then you have a tree line over here and a road, so I'm not sure what it was looking at across the river, but I could see it standing there.
Then his eyes traced its massive frame, and his breath caught. Its shoulders stretched nearly 5 feet across, giving it a presence that seemed unreal. The scale, standing in full daylight just yards from a busy interstate, was staggering. For a moment, his mind struggled to accept what he was seeing. Why would something like that stand there in plain sight?
And then its shoulders, oh my God, the shoulders were like 4.5 feet wide and humongous. Just the size of this thing and the amount of time that I saw it was mind-blowing. And I was like, wait, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Because I can't believe this. You know, there's a Sasquatch standing 100 yards, 75 to 100 yards off I-90 in the middle of the day where everybody, God and everybody could see it. Like, why is it there? Is kind of what's going through my mind.
The creature's arms hung low, fingers nearly grazing the earth, each movement deliberate and heavy with unseen strength. Its legs and torso were massive, muscles coiled to move enormous weight effortlessly. Every inch radiated power, yet carried a deliberate patience, as if aware of every gaze. Words could never capture its enormity. Its presence was overwhelming, impossible to ignore, leaving disbelief and dread long after the eyes turned away.
Its arms were down by its side, its fingers were down below its knees. It had huge legs, huge arms. Looks like, you know, it's used to tossing logs all day. It's hard to describe the bulk that you see unless you actually see it with your own eyes. But it is like...
To witness a Sasquatch standing there just yards from the highway was staggering. Fully exposed, its enormous frame dominated the scene. Every detail, from towering height to broad shoulders, commanded attention. The sheer scale and silent authority left everyone frozen, gripped by awe and disbelief.
If like the Sasquatch standing there with that much traffic, I couldn't have been the only one that saw it. I mean, it was a good 7,500 yards off of the highway, standing there in the open. It was so big you couldn't miss it.
If something this massive and intelligent can appear in broad daylight, circling a campsite in the dead of night, then what else might be watching us from the forests, unseen, curious, and closer than we ever imagined? On Travel Channel, the wilderness holds secrets most people never see. Among them is the hairy man, a massive bipedal creature cloaked in thick fur whose speed and strength are matched only by its elusive nature. Dr. Robert Alley, a cryptozoologist and former University of Alaska professor, has spent years tracking first-hand reports of this enigmatic being. Towering up to 9 feet and fiercely territorial, it appears and vanishes without warning, leaving behind a trail of sightings that blur the line between myth and reality.
The hairy man is a large, bipedal, completely hair-covered, man-like creature, very similar to Sasquatch or Bigfoot, possibly related, very large, up to maybe even 8 or 9 feet tall, very fast, very territorial, and it could be quite aggressive if provoked. These accounts are really widespread.
In the backcountry, hunters sometimes disappeared without a trace, while others were later found, their bodies violently torn apart and drifting through the lagoon. At the same time, locals reported glimpses of a massive, hair-covered figure moving silently among the trees. It wasn't the work of any known animal. There were no claw marks, no bites, only the unmistakable sign of a being both powerful and deliberate. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, leaving anyone who dared enter to wonder what exactly was watching from the shadows.
There were people that would go up in the woods and they would find dismembered and mangled bodies that would float down in the lagoon. In conjunction with that, there were sightings of a very large, hairy, man-like beast.
Was it Sasquatch? Was it some kind of hairy beast?
A bear would not be able to dismember and mutilate a body, and that would have sent a very distinct message that hairy man was responsible for this.
Paducah Andrews had known these woods her entire life, every path and hidden corner, yet nothing in her experience could have prepared her for what came next. One summer afternoon in 2015, as she bent among the berry bushes, her dog suddenly erupted in frantic, piercing barks, leaping and spinning as if trying to pull her toward danger. Paducah followed its gaze, heart racing, and froze. Between the trees moved a colossal dark figure, covered head to toe in thick hair, gliding with a presence both immense and impossibly deliberate, a sight that defied everything she thought she knew about the forest.
Barking so weird. I've never heard a dog bark like that before. She would woof, and she would jump so high off the ground, and I looked at her and I said, "What the heck are you doing?" And then she did that one more time, and I looked over to where she was looking, and I saw something real huge. It had a lot of hair, and I saw this dark creature walking away.
Sarah Armstrong, standing beside Ray, caught sight of the shadow before he even spoke. As she squinted into the distance, trying to make sense of the dark shape, a chill ran through her. It moved with a strange deliberateness, impossible to ignore. Before she could form a question, Ray's voice broke the silence filled with shock and disbelief. Both of them froze, realizing they were witnessing something entirely beyond explanation, a presence that seemed aware of every movement they made.
Like a dark black, just furry or long hair, you could see it, the outline of it pretty good.
It quickly became clear this was no ordinary creature. It was the legendary animal. Dark, shaggy, and massive, it towered even taller than most reported sightings. Frozen in disbelief, they watched as the silent figure dominated the forest, an unstoppable presence that defied explanation.
Todd Rector was out hunting with a friend and his dog.
We spotted a trail and thought, let's do some hunting and we'll hike up this trail and get up on the ridge line and get up in the spruce trees and see if we can't find some grouse.
On his way up, Todd and his friend made a sinister discovery.
The forest erupted as something massive tore through the underbrush, each crash echoing like a warning. Every instinct screamed to flee. They left immediately, hearts pounding. Todd couldn't shake the certainty. What they had seen was Bigfoot. A chilling presence lingered, a reminder that some creatures are meant to remain unseen.
A lot of noise, and you could see the trees just moving. And everything in your being is telling you to get the hell out of there. So we got out of there, and we never went back.
The question of what truly prowls the forests remains unanswered. But one thing is clear. Those who glimpsed it came face to face with a force both immense and untamed, and they have no intention of ever venturing back to challenge it again. Meet Cliff and the D-Max UK team, investigators venturing deep into some of the most mysterious and dangerous wilderness on Earth. On this journey, they travel to a remote campground southwest of the Valles Caldera to meet Joe and Vanessa, witnesses who came face to face with something that defies explanation. What began as a peaceful night under the stars quickly turned into a terrifying encounter, linking their story to other chilling reports from the same haunted region.
Cliff and I are on our way to meet with Joe and Vanessa. These are two of the witnesses who claim to have had a terrifying experience with what they think is a Sasquatch at a campground southwest of the Valles Caldera.
And if we do actually verify that that was a Sasquatch they encountered that night, that's also super important because that's another report from that same cluster, that same area.
At the end of summer, Joe and Vanessa hoped for a calm camping trip. Suddenly, Joe was shaken awake by a sound near the front of their vehicle. Something moving deliberately around the car, heading toward their supplies. Vanessa, trying to rest, spotted a massive, dark figure gliding silently between the trees. Its height and broad frame made it impossible to ignore. Terrified, Vanessa begged to leave. Joe immediately drove toward Highway 4, spending the rest of the night too shaken to return.
So is this the actual location where your encounter happened?
Yes, it was the end of summer, and me and Vanessa wanted to come camping one more time. Around 1:30 in the morning, something wakes me up. I hear something touch the front of the vehicle. It makes its way around the vehicle where we have all of our food.
I saw a tall, dark, broad figure, and it just walked right up against the truck.
She starts crying. She says, "I want to get out of here now." So I jump in the front seat and we pull out and head towards Highway 4. That night we slept on Highway 4.
How does it feel to be back?
I'm very nervous. I don't like coming here. It traumatized me. It was horrific.
Vanessa, experienced in forest sounds, knew this was different. The footsteps were upright, deliberate, and human-like in rhythm, yet completely otherworldly. Investigators have documented similar campsite encounters with figures rifling through supplies. For Vanessa, there was no doubt. This was unlike any animal she had ever encountered.
You could hear whatever it was walking around your vehicle. So have you been around deer, elk, bears, listening to an animal walk across the ground?
I've been camping my whole life, so I've heard lots of animals, and when it walked by, it wasn't like a four-legged animal. It was standing upright, walking, briskly like this.
I have heard numerous accounts by people that say Sasquatches come into campsites and go through their food.
The team then investigated Christine Archuleta near the Valles Caldera. She recalled waking to a massive, shadowy figure pressed against her cabin window. Investigators note such silent, watchful behavior is common in remote areas, with witnesses often sensing curiosity from the dark.
We're on our way out to meet Christine Archuleta. She was the one at the meeting who talked about the activity around their cabin up by the Valles Caldera. She was very scared about this, and she got very emotional telling her story.
It didn't have a neck at all, and it was leaning in my window.
This is the window over here that I woke up to find it standing outside.
Here, take us over. Let's take a look.
Christine points to the exact spot. Late into the night, she sat up and saw it, an enormous figure standing just outside, filling the window. Her heart raced, breath caught, panic surged. In that moment, she knew she was not alone.
This is where I seen it. It was between 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I stood up and I glanced straight at the window. Something extremely large was in the window. I just freaked.
The figure made no sound, yet its gaze was heavy, studying her. Leaning slightly, its head filled the frame. She briefly questioned whether it could be human, but its sheer size was impossible to ignore. Nothing she had ever seen could occupy the window like that, leaving a chilling, otherworldly impression. Using Christine's description, the team reconstructed the figure's posture with Renee. Measurements revealed it stood just under 7 feet 3 inches, looming over the cabin exactly as described. Across the region, Joe, Vanessa, and Kirk reported nearly identical heights. Investigators saw this as chilling confirmation. Christine hadn't seen a random shadow. She had come face to face with one of the area's enormous, elusive giants.
Down, I sat up. I would have been about here.
And its head got up to where about here?
About right there.
We know that the Sasquatch was leaning forward, and we also know how high the head was on the window. So we had Renee get a stick and hold it next to her, and then bend the stick over and put the top of that stick where the Sasquatch's head would have been.
All right, guys.
Do you think that what you saw that day was standing about where Renee was?
Actually, where she has it right now, that is even.
That's
to
it?
that.
We'll come outside and take that measurement.
It's a pretty big peeping Tom.
Let's see how big this thing is. That is just underneath 7 foot 3 inches tall. That's really interesting because how big was the figure that Kirk filmed? Between 7 and 7.5 feet tall.
That's right.
How big was the figure that Joe and Vanessa saw? Between 7 and 7.5 feet tall.
So it's not just you. You just happen to be in the right place for it.
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable saying you saw one of the local family groups of Bigfoots.
I wasn't sitting there in the window with you. This is the opportunity that I want. This is why I walk out in the woods with these guys.
Some suggest Christine may have encountered the same entity reported by Kirk, Joe, and Vanessa, linking these sightings into a chilling pattern across the valley's caldera. Could Christine, Joe, and Vanessa have all encountered the same mysterious figure? And if so, what exactly lurks in the forests of the Valley Caldera? On Small Town Monsters, investigators explore tales that start ordinary and spiral into the unexplainable. Chris Spencer and his son camped alone at Skamania County Campground during spring break. By day, they found twisted maple vines, broken branches, and a massive impression in the ground.
First people in, and only people in the campground, and we found a vine maple that was limb twist broke, an 18 by 9 inch impression in the ground. We found other branches snapped off of fir trees 12 feet up. And that night, and we thought, oh, cool, you know, didn't think.
But that night, terror struck. Something entered their campsite and forcefully grabbed their tent. What happened remains a mystery, leaving them with a chilling story no one can fully explain. Alone in the night, Chris heard movement circling the campground, 2 unseen presences testing him while his children slept.
Was in the campground, there's at least 2 moving back and forth around the camp. I think they were just messing with us, but around 4 in the morning, wow, it was like a rock on a tree, knock, everything went quiet. I got out of the tent and built up a fire and waited for my kid to get up. After that, that's when I decided to start doing stuff like that.
Frozen inside the tent, weapon across his chest, he couldn't move. A sharp knock rang through the trees, then silence. When he finally emerged, he built a fire and waited. That night changed everything. Chris knew he had to find answers. John Sheridan, a seasoned investigator, has spent years listening to those who've encountered the unexplained. Some describe distant figures, calm and almost harmless, as if the forest itself is watching.
It's a difficult question because it depends. You know, I've heard so many different encounters and I've talked to so many different people. There's some things that really stand out. That you've seen, you know, they've seen a figure in the distance, right? Or it seemed friendly, and they didn't seem like it was aggressive or there was any concern. They didn't have any fear, no feeling of dread or anything like that. But then there's some times where they're being pelted with rocks.
Others share darker tales. Rocks thrown from nowhere, invisible forces stalking them, or strange disturbances at home. For Sheridan, each story unveils a hidden world where moments of calm can suddenly turn into chilling menace. Chris Brinker, known for investigating the unexplained, often hears stories from people who never thought they'd have one to share. Anyone spending time in these woods seems to have at least one tale worth telling. Even longtime friends now come forward with experiences they kept secret.
I'm usually, because when I first started, I had to really learn all the other animals too, so I listened while I looked, but most of the target subject vocalizations, they fall in a certain hertz range, and a lot of times they'll look similar to human vocalizations, and so I look at a narrow hertz range, and when I see something that doesn't match up with the known animals, then I stop and I look at it, because I look at it visually just like David does. And it's something over time. I've been doing it since 2015, it's 2021 now.
One recalled parking with a girl when two glowing red eyes stared from the trees, vanishing as mysteriously as they appeared.
I've had multiple friends at work, talk about different situations. It seems like, anybody that spends any time in the woods around here has an experience, at least one that they talk about. People that you never would have thought, and you mentioned that now that I do the investigating and they know that I do that, some people come forward and be like, oh yeah, I have something that happened to me that I never told anybody about. I had a friend who was out parking with a girl and had two red eyes that he caught staring at him from in the trees that just disappeared.
For Brinker, these moments show just how thin the line is between ordinary and the inexplicable. As night fell, Rebecca Slick and her group settled into sleeping bags, chatter fading. Suddenly, a tree crashed down. It wasn't just a simple camping trip anymore. With no wind to explain the fall, Rebecca realized something unnatural might be nearby.
Bed, we're all in our sleeping bags, and all of a sudden the chatter of us starting to die down to go to bed is broken by this tree fall. That changed the game, because it went from just, okay, we're gonna just be out here camping, to, oh my goodness, there's no wind. It's possible that this could be natural.
In an instant, a peaceful night in the woods became unsettling, a possible creature lurking just beyond sight. Jody Fiorganes recounted the terrifying experience his mother endured, a presence more than a shape, massive and dark, filling the space around her vehicle. It struck suddenly, a violent impact on the front of the car, a jolt along the side, and a force that touched her hair, snapping her head back.
Others that we think of as being very passive. But as to what's creating those situations, what's causing those reports to manifest in the way they do, I don't know that there's any conclusive answer to that, at least at this point. We do tend to see, at least in most places, that sightings spike during the times of the year that people are outdoors, which makes sense. But as far as what time of the year, what location, what climate, if that makes them more aggressive, less aggressive, you do hear quite a few stories coming out of Florida, the skunk ape, sometimes Louisiana, the Honey Island area.
The smell alone suggested it was no ordinary animal. Even without a clear view, its closeness made it undeniable. She had come face to face with something extraordinary. His mother wasn't afraid. She believed the contact wasn't an attack, just curiosity. That single mysterious touch sparked a question haunting Jody.
Just given the behaviors and the things we're talking about, they seem to be pretty consistent, and they're reported. Ape Canyon, if we are to believe the story of the miners, that was done as a sort of aggressive response to being shot at, or there was a curiosity factor with if the cabin was actually there. When the cabin was built, there seemed to be encounters with these creatures, and the miners started shooting at them. And if we're to believe that story, maybe that tells us that they were curious, what are people doing in this really hard to reach place? And then it turned into aggressive behavior. So that was, I think, situational again.
What was out there? Watching, testing, trying to understand them. For him, proving her right became more than theory. It became a challenge to confront the unknown. Flash of beauty. Bigfoot revealed. Returns to a remote cabin where the forest feels alive with unexplained activity. Residents report noises, fleeting shapes, and moments that leave neighbors shaken. What once seemed isolated has escalated into a hot zone of activity, hinting at a presence that observes, waits, and reveals itself in the most unsettling ways.
We have had stuff happen outside of the cabin 24/7, and it kind of comes and goes. Like we're in a category right now where it's a hot zone of activity happening here. Like last night.
Yeah.
Was stuff going on. The neighbors were freaking out, and mainly with just noises, but everybody's kind of seen something.
Heard something.
What was the first thing you remembered as far as like the trickster activity happening?
A secluded cabin has long been haunted by an unseen presence. Rich, a longtime resident, lives under its shadow. His daughter once glimpsed it, and the family has felt the brush charged with unseen energy. Knocks and objects moving in the night have left them terrified. Though Rich has never seen it himself, he knows something watches and waits in the darkness.
History that there's been like a visual sighting by his daughter. They were bluff charged through the brush before they cleared it out in that area down below. That he's heard like knocks and sounds of things like getting hit or smacked or moved, I think, but I don't think he himself had a visual sighting out here. The previous people that lived in the cabin that we're in, which is, you know, other family members, would have the walls smacked by something in the middle of the night that freaked them out.
The next day, a small triangular piece of gravel drew attention. At first, it seemed ordinary, but Rich found it again, neatly resting atop a log, strangely cleaned and deliberately placed. The gesture hinted at a presence watching, leaving subtle marks that defy explanation.
And then I think it was the next day, I look outside and there's a piece of gravel that's somewhat triangular shaped, but it wasn't. I was like, I remember it being more perfect, and maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was, and I was about to like throw it. And then Rich found that rock down there sitting on top of a log, and it was cleaned off.
It began with small signs. Objects slightly moved, subtle disturbances. But soon, the sounds grew impossible to ignore. Close by, deliberate single knocks echoed against the wood, sharp and distinct, like a heavy bat swinging. Each strike carried unmistakable weight, as if something unseen was announcing its presence with careful precision.
And we should say that there is a rock quarry not too far from us, and periodically you got good old boys going down there unloading clips. But that wasn't this. These were like really close wood knocks, and they were singles. There wasn't like, you know, a pistol or a shot. It was like a single wood knock, like a Louisville Slugger wood knock.
Among the strangest signs was a dark imprint on the rear cabin wall. Resembling a human hand pressed and burned into the wood, it lingered, a silent witness to the inexplicable presence around the cabin. Suddenly, movement caught their eyes along the road. A shadow shifted in the underbrush, low and cautious, barely revealing itself. Moments later, it slipped across the path and vanished, leaving a sense that something unseen was silently stalking the area.
There it is.
What?
I think. Yep, there it's moving.
What?
Yeah, there it is. It's on the right side of the road. You see it?
Yeah.
It crossed the road, and then remember there's that section where it's like, it's on, crouching behind kind of like the fern, or not the fern, but the bushes on the right side.
The final shot.
Yeah, I think that happened after, because it crossed, and then you were like, is it still there? And then we saw it.
Faint, piercing cries drifted from deep in the thick woods. At times resembling a human scream, they carried an unmistakable otherworldly quality, forcing the group to stop and listen in tense silence. As they edged into the forest, the sound abruptly vanished. 20 minutes of piercing wails had closed in on them, only to disappear as they approached. Peering through the underbrush, all that remained was silence, and a creeping sense that something had intentionally slipped away, just out of reach. Finally, the sounds drifted away, as if the forest itself revealed, then withdrew. Whispers lingered, eerily articulate, yet nothing human stirred. Every rustle, every call hinted at a presence watching just beyond sight, leaving the air thick with tension.
Different animal sounds, and then it gave itself up by just going off into...
I don't know what my favorite is. Mine has to either be the little girl or the talking, because we know there's no little girl in the woods.
After knocks in the night, fleeting shadows, strange cries, and marks that defy explanation, the forest seems to breathe with a presence just beyond sight. But what force has claimed these woods? And who, or what, truly watches from the darkness? In the remote wilderness of Alaska, a child named Osh would later recount a moment that changed how his family viewed the forest forever. While out early one morning, the stillness was shattered by terrifying screams echoing from different directions. Frozen, Osh turned toward the sound and came face to face with a massive figure standing motionless, staring back at him. For a boy raised around wildlife, this was no ordinary encounter.
Early one morning by myself, and as soon as I turned around, I heard these loud screams coming in 3 directions, and I just froze. And I turned, and there's about this 8-foot creature standing there just staring at me. And I froze up. I looked right in its eyes.
His account would later be featured on Animal Planet, raising a chilling question. What kind of presence watches from the edges of the wild? He stood locked in place, staring into eyes that felt unnaturally aware. Overwhelmed by fear, he dropped his gaze and shut his eyes, hoping it would end.
And I put my head straight down and I closed my eyes. And about a good 3 minutes later, I hear just thump, thump, thump. And I open my eyes and I look up and I could just see trees just clearing, although the screams are still going on from the other creatures.
It was walking away from you?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine the kind of fear that Osh probably had in him at that point, but I could see it on his face. It was very clear. He was unnerved.
Moments later, heavy impacts moved through the forest. Branches snapped. Trees were forced aside as something massive retreated. Yet the haunting cries continued from elsewhere in the woods, suggesting he had never been alone. In that moment, his mind went blank, overwhelmed by the feeling that this encounter might be the last of his life. For a young boy barely into his teens, he stood alone in the wilderness, holding a small hunting rifle that suddenly felt useless.
It's just a flashback of my life. I honestly thought I was gonna die. It was bad.
You gotta imagine there was this 12-year-old boy out there, you know, the little deer rifle, and all of a sudden here's this 8-foot, 800-pound, whatever, just some gigantic, huge monster growling at him. And he just went into shock. What do you think you saw?
Yes, I saw Sasquatch.
What charged toward him was enormous, far heavier and more powerful than anything he could comprehend. The shock froze his body, stripping away the ability to react. Even now, he struggles to explain what he faced that day, knowing only that it was something far beyond his understanding. From roughly 30 feet away, investigators later recreated the sighting. Using a raised marker, they estimated where the top of the figure's head would have reached. The result was staggering, nearly 9 feet tall. Such a size ruled out known wildlife in the region and aligned with massive tracks previously documented nearby.
Now, the mind plays tricks on you, especially in a moment of complete fear, but I really believe this kid saw something.
If you pointed out here, how close would you say it was when you first saw it?
Probably 20, 25 feet, probably to that tree right there.
I'm kind of interested, though, to see how big this was. I'm gonna go stand over by in between those 2 trees for size comparison. You tell me when to stop when you think about how close it was to you, and I'll stop, and then you can kind of say how big you think it was compared to me.
The connection was unsettling. The investigators acknowledged the courage it took for Osh to share his experience. recognizing the fear he faced that day. To them, there was no doubt his encounter was real and deeply significant. As the light began to fade and the forest grew quieter, they expressed their gratitude and asked him to guide them safely back before darkness settled in.
I was interested to see the size of the creature that Osh encountered, so we put Bobo off at a fair distance. Actually, Osh stopped him when he said, yeah, it's about that far away.
You know, we're about 30 feet apart right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna raise this stick up and you tell me when you think the top of the stick is at where the top of its head was.
Okay. Say about right there.
So that's about 9 foot.
We found that the creature was probably about 8.5 or 9 feet tall. That puts it squarely in the realm of the average adult male Sasquatch.
In a place where something unknown had already revealed itself once, no one was eager to remain after nightfall. And as the forest grew silent once more, a chilling thought remained. How many unseen eyes still linger in the shadows, quietly tracking those who dare to enter? These encounters remind us that the wilderness holds secrets far beyond our understanding. Faces glimpsed in the shadows, footsteps that vanish into the night, and the eerie silence that follows. What truly prowls these forests, watching, waiting, and unseen? The question isn't just who or what, but when it will appear next. Share your thoughts in the comment section.